The reading of the Gospel this evening comes from the book of John, 1 John, verses 43 through 51. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under a fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly, I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks.
When I was in the 8th grade, and last week I talked about when I was in the 6th grade. This is not going to happen much more. I don't have to see a play show. But I gotta tell you, every time I read this lesson from John's Gospel, I am transported back to my 8th grade. I really understand, I think, some of the dynamics of what's happening in the Gospel lesson because of what happened to me when I was in the 8th grade. My father got transferred from Newark, Ohio to Zanesville, Ohio. And we moved about a week or so before school started, so I didn't know anybody. And we went from a city school system where I rode my bike to school to a rural system where I had to get on a bus and ride a bus to school. And that was very, very intimidating to me. Very intimidating. And I remember that first day, I get on the bus, and this long aluminum tube. Where am I going to sit? I don't know anyone. And I make my way back, and I sit down. And I discovered something about the bus. It was sort of like a laboratory. It was like a school. And people that sat in the back of the bus was teaching how to listen, how to tell, how to express jokes. And the jokes they were teaching were not necessarily jokes that you may want to share in mixed company. And here I was brand new, not knowing a soul, anxious to get connected in some way. And so I was tempted to get sucked into that crowd and learn these new jokes I had never heard before. Jokes that were belittling to a particular segment of our society, a particular group of people. And, you know, my mother would have a fit if she ever heard or learned that I was telling jokes that belittled a particular group of people, because my mother never tolerated any of that. She just didn't. Prejudice was a no-no in my family. I remember as a kid, my mom pulling me aside and saying, "You need to pay attention to this Martin Luther King guy. He's got something to say." And so my mother was sort of out there in the early 60s. She also pulled me aside and said, "You need to pay attention to this guy named Dog Hummersfold." You know, all these characters she would lay on me growing up. This guy has something to say. You know? And so if she knew that I was participating in this with this group of guys, and I remember one of them, his name was Dickie Wales. Dickie Wales was great at telling these jokes. And again, they were directed in a derogatory way to a particular group of people. That people were people who lived across the river in the state of West Virginia. They were all telling West Virginia jokes. It was the thing in Zanesville to make fun of people from West Virginia. And in order to get along, I played along. I'm sorry about that if you're from West Virginia. I really am. But there was this attitude that people in Zanesville, 8th grade boys in Zanesville had, that if you grew up in West Virginia, you weren't the brightest bulb on the shelf, the sharpest tool in the woodshed, whatever metaphor you want to use. And so people in Zanesville, these 8th grade boys in Zanesville, would take great delight in making fun of West Virginians. When I moved to Columbus at the end of my junior year in high school, I discovered that in Columbus they did not tell jokes about people from West Virginia. West Virginians were not even on the radar screen. But I learned in the group of people I played euchre with at lunchtime that they made fun of a different group of people from a different nationality across the sea. And by that time, I had enough of my mother in me to know that this is someplace I better never, ever go. They were making fun of people from Poland. And I just sort of sat there and played. My mother was a pretty strong influence on me, and if she ever caught me doing something like that, she'd get me in some way, I don't know. And years later, after college, I pack up and I go to seminary, and I get to know people from Indiana attending our seminary, and I discovered something. People who lived on the east side of Indiana make fun of Ohioans. What is it about us that likes to make fun of people who are different than we are? And it seems like if you go west, the state west of the border makes fun of the people that live east of them. And it just sort of backtracks all the way across the country. Making fun of West Virginians, writing them off. And the gospel lesson. Philip discovers Jesus. Jesus is out trying to create a community of people and to do his work, to help him do this, to meet this mission that God has given him. And we all know what that mission is. It's to reconcile all things in heaven and earth. I mean, that's what it says in Ephesians, and I like that idea. This is Jesus' mission. To reconcile between God and God's people. All things in heaven and earth. All things. And so Jesus is smart enough to know that he can't do that by himself. So he needs to get together with people to follow him and to work with him and to learn. And he connects with Philip. And Philip is just utterly impressed with Jesus. And he has this passion and enthusiasm. Don't you love the passion and enthusiasm you sense in Philip? Oh, I've met this guy. And Philip runs into one of his friends, Nathaniel, and he says, oh, Nathaniel, I've met this guy. Let me tell you about this Jesus guy. And he starts just telling Nathaniel about Jesus. Everything that he could think of, he's telling Nathaniel about Jesus. We don't get the whole conversation, just a snippet of it. But in the process, Philip lets it slip that Jesus is from Nazareth. Now, in that day and age, Nazareth was to Nathaniel what West Virginia was to those 8th grade boys on the back of my bus. And Nathaniel shoots back. It's probably a pretty funny thing when you think about it. What good ever came out of Nazareth? He slammed Jesus. Could be anything in any town. It came from Nazareth. And so here, Nathaniel's ready to write Jesus off. Write Jesus off because he harbors these attitudes, he harbors these prejudices, he harbors these beliefs. And he probably harbors these things because it comforts him, it makes him feel superior. When we look down on someone else, it sort of makes us feel good about ourselves at somebody else's expense. He's ready to write off Jesus. And this is what our prejudices, our attitudes like this do. They make it easy for us to write off people. They really do. Oh, I don't like that person. That person is a whatever. I don't like that. I don't have to pay attention to him. Write him off. And let's face it, if we're all honest, we tend to write off people from time to time. For whatever reason. Well, the problem for Nathaniel is that later on in this story that John shares with us, he encounters Jesus. This guy that he has written off because he comes from Nazareth. He encounters Jesus. And if you follow Jesus in the Gospels, Jesus has this nasty habit. It's really a good habit, but it's nasty on the part of the person who he connects with. Of being able to look into the person and start telling that person things nobody else knows. You ever met people like that? You can take a look at you, sort of look into your eyes, and have a sense of who you are. Then they make you really uncomfortable. You can't hide from them. I just had a professor, one of my professors would just look at me and do when I was blowing smoke. You could just tell. And it took every ounce of courage I had to take every class he offered. Because he was so good. But it always made me uncomfortable. He said, okay, McGlade, you're blowing smoke here. You haven't done your work here. You need to go back and do this again. And I learned theology from the guy. It was not comfortable. And Jesus was sort of like that. He could look into a person's eyes and just remember the woman at the well. Never met her before, but before long he was describing all of her relationships and her dysfunctions and all that kind of stuff. And she's sitting there going, oh my gosh. And we have in the gospel lesson today Jesus coming up to Nathaniel after Nathaniel had written him off. He said, hi, Nathaniel. Wait, how do you know me? Oh, I saw you at the tree. I saw you talking to Philip. I saw this. I know this. And you get the impression that Jesus, in his own quiet and subtle and gentle way, is letting Nathaniel know that he knows what Nathaniel thinks of people who come from where he came from. This has got to be an incredibly awkward moment for Nathaniel. Here he has written off a guy who is, by all standards of measures, the brightest ball on the shelf, the sharpest tool in the tool shed, the most perceptive character Here you wrote off a guy who seems to know things about him that he just couldn't fathom how he would know this stuff. Who has his number? And this is the other thing about the encounter. Jesus reveals all this stuff to Nathanael, not in a judgmental way, but in a kind and loving and gentle way. So here's this guy who has opened up to Nathanael this soul wound that causes him to behave in the way he does. But instead of condemning him, wants to heal him, wants to love him, wants to care for him. And so at this moment, Nathanael has to make a choice. He has to choose whether he's going to hold on to his prejudices and thereby dismiss and push Jesus away, or to abandon his prejudices and take the leap of faith to find a place within his own life for this guy who comes from a people he's not comfortable being around. And that's the choice that Daniel has to make. It is. And it's a choice we all have to make. Because as I said earlier, we all have prejudices. We all have attitudes. We all have those little quirks that make us wonder about certain people. You know? We just do. And it would never occur to us that God may use somebody from that particular group of people to be a way of deepening our faith relationship with God. To use one of those people from that particular community to clear the clutter out of our lives so that we may experience anew a grace that we are hungry to experience. That God might use somebody from Nazareth, or West Virginia, or Poland, or Ohio. That God might use someone from a different culture, a different race, a different nationality. When I went to seminary, as I said, I learned all about how Indianans like to make fun of Ohioans and Iowans like to make fun of Minnesotans, because it's the way Minnesota talks, I guess. When I went into the ministry after seminary, I developed a relationship with a colleague of mine who was about 20 years older. He eventually became head of the office of ministry, and I got to work a lot with him. I admired this man. I loved this man. This man taught me so much. He was a mentor in the truest sense of the word. Lou was just one of the saddest days of my ministry is the year he retired from ministry. And one of the sadder days was when he contracted a horrible, disabling disease, and when he passed away. But Lou taught me a whole lot of things. He taught me about leadership, and he taught me about pastoring. And I can remember one of the most powerful days of my own life in ministry was when I was in his office in Columbus, and I looked over at the telephone and he had my name on his speed dial. I thought I had arrived. And he told jokes, lots of jokes. And occasionally he would tell us a West Virginia joke. And he told one several years before he passed away that was really, really funny. And after he told it, he said to the group of us that were in the committee that we were working with him, said, you know, I'm the only one in this room that can tell that joke. Because it's my people. It's my heritage. I can make fun of my people. You can't. And he's right about that. We all have to laugh at ourselves. I remember once when a Mennonite colleague of mine told a Methodist joke. And it was pretty funny. But I was a little offended. It was a Mennonite telling me this joke that made Methodist look sort of bad. Maybe I told you the joke. It is a pretty good joke. I could tell this joke because I'm a Methodist. You know, the joke went like this. The joke went like this. It was like a new Lutheran pastor in town goes to get his hair cut at the barber, and he tells the barber he's a new Lutheran pastor in town. So the barber says, well, it's my courtesy. I give pastors free haircuts. Did I tell you this joke before? I give pastors free haircuts. And so the next day when the barber went to his shop, there was on the step of his shop a pack of very fine German beer with a note, thank you for the haircut, signed the name of the Lutheran pastor. And a couple of weeks later, a new Catholic priest goes to town, and he goes to the barber, and he tells, you know, the barber says, well, it's my custom to give clergy free haircuts, and the Catholic priest thanks him. And then the next morning when the barber got to his shop, there was this very fine Italian wine with a note attached, thank you for the haircut, signed the Catholic priest. And then the new Methodist pastor in town goes to the barber, and he goes to pay, and the barber says, it's my custom to give free haircuts to clergy in town, and the Methodist pastor thanked him. And then the next morning when the barber went to the shop, he found standing outside the shop 10 United Methodist pastors. Now, I can tell that joke. But I didn't think it was right for the Mennonite guy to tell it. And the sad part about that joke is it's probably true. But you know, our prejudices really do give us permission to dismiss people. And I think what this story in the gospel is trying to tell us, dismissing people is hazardous to our souls. And we all have a choice to continue to harbor our prejudices and our attitudes, or to open our hearts, our minds, and our hearts. You are a loved people. Never forget that. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.